especially after doing John and Jen, which was 2015, I started to think I really wanted to commission an intimate musical. And I remember we had a meal together at the Westway. And I'm pretty sure you got a grilled cheese with fries.
Yes, that sounds very much like me, circa 2015. One of the most nerve-wracking moments in a writer's experience of writing a new musical is the moment that you first send stuff to the powers that be, which in this case is yourself. And dare I ask, what was your reaction to that first draft of the show?
I distinctly remember I was in the office and I couldn't wait at all, and I just had to listen to the first song. Saturday Night in a Small Auditorium. And I listened to it, and I immediately started crying. So you had us at the first song. So Adam.
Yes, Johnny.
Do you remember when we first met?
I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we met after I had gotten the Richard Rodgers Award for this other musical called String.
Yes.
And I was reaching out to a bunch of theaters looking for someone to workshop the show with this grant. And I emailed you and you said, oh my gosh, yes. In fact, I've been meaning to reach out to you because all these people on our board are from the Roundabout, where I had done the show Ordinary Days, and they had been talking to you about me. So we met about this other musical, but very quickly started talking about Ordinary Days and how Keen had their eye on doing a revival of that show at some point. I think that's the first time that we met.
I think that is the first time, and I'm going to fill it in just a little bit.
Yes, please.
In that so when I took over as artistic director, the first thing I did was a musical. We produced a revival of Stephen Sondheim's "Marry Me a Little,"
Which I saw.
Which you did, you saw it. And I remember at a certain board meeting after we started performances, it was so successful, and the board was so excited by this idea of intimate musicals. And a few board members said, like, oh my God, you not only have to meet Adam Gwon, but you need to produce Ordinary Days next year. And I remember saying, yes, but Ordinary Days was just done 2 years ago, so it might need to wait a little bit.
People like to revive things early these days.
They do.
Like, if they like something, they want it back.
They do. But I do also remember eventually going to see that reading of String that you did at Playwrights Horizons. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away by your music.
Well, thank you.
After doing Marry Me a Little, and then especially after doing John and Jen, which was 2015, I started to think I really wanted to commission an intimate musical. And I remember we had a meal together at the Westway. And I'm pretty sure you got a grilled cheese with fries.
Yes, that sounds very much like me, circa 2015.
And I remember talking with you and saying, oh, I really want to, do a commission, and I don't understand how that works. And we kind of had a little whole conversation about commissioning.
I do remember from those early conversations that this dream you had about Keen commissioning something new that they could premiere was very much on your radar for a long time. So this moment right now feels like it has been a long time coming.
So fast forward to 2016 or 17, and I remember I wanted to do another musical, and this was after Tick, Tick, Boom, and I remember listening to Ordinary Days obsessively. I remember specifically walking in the park and crying, and I think I called you, we had a meeting in the office, and we chatted for maybe a half hour, and then I said to you, We want to produce Ordinary Days next year. You were definitely taken aback in a wonderful way when I originally proposed it.
Yeah. Well, what's wild, I remember, when I wrote the show and when it was first produced, I was much closer in age and experience to the younger set of characters in that show. And then when Keen came around and said that they wanted to do the revival, I was squarely in the camp of the older characters in the show. And just even that like shift in perspective just in, not that many years since the show was created and first ran, it really struck me as this like really interesting, fascinating milestone for a writer to get to look back at something that they wrote when they were a slightly different person and look at it through newer, older, wiser eyes.
And you revised Ordinary Days
Yeah, well,
for that
exactly.
production
Yeah,
for that very reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I think also the seeds of this commission and us working together began in that project, not only on us just working on the piece, but I think working together in the rewrites that you did, and especially that change that you made to the opening number, where sort of everyone came on at once. And then also those new orchestrations. So it felt a little bit like what I like to call a revisal.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
And so we sort of got the baby steps of sort of like working on a new piece together.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting how you can just draw a beautiful clear line from the Westway Diner to Ordinary Days to this commission.
I love that.
So we commissioned you, and tell me a little bit about your process about where this musical actually came from.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, this call with the commission came right in the middle of the pandemic. And one thing that I think had been on my mind and in my heart was, reckoning with this idea that theater had gone away for a period of time. And I think, I realized during that time, how much I loved theater and how much it meant to me. And then the flip side of that coin, in that very bizarre time where so much was happening in the world, that theater was not able to help with. Like we pre-pandemic, I felt like I walked through the streets of New York City very confident that theater could save the world. And then was like punched in the face with the fact that like there are some ways in which theater cannot save the world. But there are other ways in a very intimate, very personal way that theater had shaped me, and I think shapes a lot of people, and like has an impact on the world in that way. So that idea was sort of weighing in my mind. And as I was thinking about all of that, my mind just naturally went to my teachers in high school, who were really the people who showed me what theater is and forged that connection and made theater matter so much to like me, my own sort of personal universe. And of course, at that time, in the news and in the culture, there are all these other conversations about teachers, and specifically LGBTQ teachers, and how much of their identities they were allowed to bring into the classroom, and how much of those identities were allowed to be represented in the history and the literature that kids were studying in school. And this light bulb went off in my head. I can't believe it took this long, but I was like, oh my God, at least some of my teachers in high school were gay, like 100%. Like I know for a fact because I'm still in touch with some of them now. And that was not on my radar at all. I went to like a pretty progressive, like public school for the arts, and like no one was gay, no one talked about it. And given all the stuff that was happening around this today in the news, I was like, gosh, what would it have been like if I had known that one of my teachers was gay when I was a teenager? And I don't know the answer to that question because it's not what happened. But those ideas sort of started shaping themselves into a story. I actually started doing a little research just about what was going on with gay teachers in public schools in the 90s kind of thing. And I stumbled on one particular book that was about one public school teacher in Michigan in the 90s who was outed and then subsequently fired. It's a much more complicated and interesting story that's written about in this book. But I was really sort of intrigued and moved by this story. And the sort of villain in the story was the principal of this high school, which was it was a public school, but it was in a very conservative, very religious community in which the principal was involved. And the principal treated this teacher so poorly in this book in the 90s that I was like, I just have to Google this guy because times have changed, and like this, I can't believe this happened. What is this guy doing now? And I Googled the principal, and he is currently a Republican elected official in Michigan. And I literally saw that and said, oh my God, I have to write this musical because it actually is really relevant to this moment. So that was sort of the thing that got the ball rolling, at least.
I've got to say, like, you're a brilliant composer. And I've always thought you told such a beautiful, emotional story through your music. But the complex, multi-layered, beautiful way that you wrote this book in combination with the songs just utterly blew me away from the first reading of it.
Oh, thank you.
And I think I felt a couple other things. Number one...
Disgust, fear,
anxiety. Number one, you truly wrote a keen musical. Like, that felt keen. It felt like that it had that generosity of heart, but it also had that complexity of heart and hope in it. It wasn't simple, but it was so moving. It felt very keen. Also, that it was about theater really blew me away. And also that at its heart, that the story was about someone trying to be their authentic self and how difficult that can be. I really resonated with that personally. So when I first read it, I thought, God, he really knew his audience.
Audience of one, Johnny Silverstein.
So it felt like a gift to this company, and it felt like a gift to me personally. And I'm also gonna say that it felt like a gift to the theaters that will do it after Keene. One of my goals with this commission was to create a new intimate musical, yes, for Keene Company, but also for other theaters across the country and across the world. Finding these intimate musicals that actually feel like plays with music, are really hard to find. And there's a great demand for these musicals with companies that may not have the resources to do big, splashy musicals. And I think it's very uncanny how you set your musical in a small town, because I think that this musical is going to play so beautifully in so many communities throughout the country. And so, yes, it was a gift to Keene, it was a gift to me, but I think it's really a gift to theaters of all sizes throughout the country.
Oh, that's very sweet of you to say.